Manufacturing jobs. We've had an increase of 500,000 new manufacturing jobs, and a lot of these, the previous administration, President Obama in particular, said would never come back. He said you got to get used to these jobs going away forever. Well, in fact, they've come back to the tune of 500,000. That's progress for blue-collar workers.
There's no question about it. I mean, I think that President Obama was clearly wrong about manufacturing jobs never coming back again to the United States, because clearly they have. But going back to the tax cuts, I don't believe that the wealthy were only the beneficiaries. I think that most Americans did benefit. But the tax code has a way of picking winners and losers. And the winners were those who were in low-tax states, and the losers were those who were in high-tax states. I have seen many wealthy taxpayers, particularly in my practice, where they're concentrated in the New York metropolitan area, have gotten clobbered by the lack of tax cuts for them. But when you have middle class and people who are on the lower end of the earning spectrum, they have absolutely benefited from the tax cuts. And I believe the economy is clearly showing that, because confidence is up.
Yeah, well, I think it's really how you define wealthy, because certainly, you know, the top, let's say, you know, 1/10 of 1% may have benefited, but when you expand, let's say, wealthy to the top 5%, 10%, and start including those people from the higher tax states, you're starting to see the states that have the people leaving the most are these higher tax states. So New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, in last year had some of the highest rates of people moving out of those states. So clearly there are wealthy individuals who are moving because the taxes are so onerous.
And Jackie, you know, a lot of people, even I live in a high tax, I live right in Manhattan, so I get clobbered not only by the state but by the city. But I must say, I actually had made a little more, you know, because of the tax changes, because you had an end of some of the onerous tax code that they got rid of. But the bottom line is we had a loss of 350 points on Friday, and a lot of that came because of what is happening on tariffs. Could that eliminate the progress that has been made with the tax cuts?
You read my mind. So the first thing is, most people that I've spoken to have said in their paycheck they have felt a little bit more money sticking to their bones, and obviously it would depend on what they're making. So that was a trend that we've seen over the last year, and it will continue. The second point you made about the market drop that we saw was the worst May that we've seen since 2010 in 9 years.
Yeah, it wasn't just the day, it was the whole month.
People are scared. And when you listen to what your previous guest was saying regarding autos, for example, it's not just going to hit corporations when we look at tariffs that have to deal with China and have to deal with Mexico. If those costs are passed on to the consumer, that will effectively feel like a tax. So that will eat into some of the savings that they've seen.
Although surprisingly, he said he'd still be in favor of Donald Trump because of the effects of the tax cuts and the regulatory cuts.
Well, Tom is clearly a loyal Trump supporter, that he's willing to sacrifice his business sales for supporting the president. But listen, I heard Charles Payne say something very interesting regarding these tariffs.
He only says interesting.
Yeah, yes, he does.
That's all he says.
But he said something interesting. He said, ultimately, obviously, tariffs are a tax. Yeah. But what's going to happen is that people will not accept that tax in the form of tariffs being passed through. They are going to change their buying patterns, right?
That's all.
So now what happens, David, what happens is countries like China and Mexico, if they want to sell into the United States, they're going to have to adjust their pricing. Yeah. Now, will that happen? It's a very interesting point of view.
Aaron, we